Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and welcome back to this week's enrichment reading. So we kind of have a two-parter, and we started last week with Womb World, and that was cool. I like that. I think that was really interesting. Like, I always sort of knew that the womb world was significant and that our dreams sort of came from our time there, and that we can go there and sort of like interact with the energies of our inner world, like whenever we want to be with family. And the things that created us, and even like the God that created us, like that's an important thing too. But we are looking at the dominant myths, which for all intents and purposes, the dominant myths that we live by and with, again, we like mold into the shape of. In Womb World, we take on traits imprint on us as potentials that are either going to like uplift or leave us at kind of a debt, or even more of a debt than the last life afforded us with it, you know? So when we come into this world, then like stories imprint on us, and we sort of begin to embody the stories that like have that impact, and we imprint and we form into the aspiration of that expression, and that becomes like personality traits in some ways. So it's like the nature-nurture combo. And we're looking at these dominant myths and the archetypal stories that like are basically the gods whose stories we inherited when we came to this world. We're working out their stories. We're working out the stories of the gods and goddesses that predated us in those worldviews. And so that was kind of like a lot. It's like I always want to get it all out in one mouthful, and I end up repeating a lot just to try and like do justice to these concepts. So we're entering back into our Akashic Records. And as we go back into our Akashic Records, we're going to look up this time, this place, the demon like that showed up in Womb World. I think we should, if you haven't seen Womb World, I would watch that one first. And that demon is like a codependent demon. It's part of the dominant myth, the happily ever after, that we have to look at, that it's a false, deified, almost like an egregore. But I think it's not quite an egregore. I think it has its own, there's something that this is distorted, and the story needs to move from like the shadow, which is like the happily ever after, into the light, and an ascended position, which is like the reality of like what we're, and reality is a weird word to place on this because it's theoretical work, but like to bring into like the light and make that the dominant view. So let's go ahead and have that be our intention, to sort of just get a better sense of where we are, what we're dealing with in terms of the stories that we're working with and the energies of those stories, and what it means to make sense of it all. So let's go ahead and get some cards. So we're going back into the Akashic Records, and we are looking up our ascension journey with these stories, these archetypes, these gods. Wow, this is cool. Queen of Pentacles. I like that there's a feeling sometimes that I get that are like this ancient quality to the stories as they come through. Now, as I look at that page of swords, I'm actually hearing curses, which is interesting because I've been doing a lot of ancestral work, and with my Greek ancestry, which there's a whole thing. That's a lot of work in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, we're all meant to sort of like look at things and develop a relationship to these things that is positive and healing. But I've been working for a long time on trying to get to pull the root of the curse of the evil eye. Because if you go to Greece and you see, like, almost as the flag of Greece, practically, like almost as the symbol, there is a spirit from that lineage that is like of a curse of the envy, the evil eye. I mean, literally, like, in my family, if somebody gives you a compliment, like, we spit, like, immediately, you spit on the floor. And the reason that you do that is because you are protecting yourself. You can't take a compliment. You're not allowed to receive a compliment. You're not allowed to, like, whenever I give examples, like when we're doing these readings, I always refer to jealousy or envy, because that is a energy that is like from that my family lineage deals with. And it's so much so that there's a symbol that you wear, and a reaction to to being admired, that you're supposed to throw it off and run away from it because it's going to get you hurt. You're going to get punished. You'll be punished for your beauty. You'll be punished for your effervescence. You'll be punished for any good qualities. And so when we think about what it means to like attend to these stories and attend to the energies in these stories, like what I'm being shown in the Akashic record here is that this is related to an ancient curse. Now, the way that you are able to get rid of an ancient curse, like these are actually a lot harder to get rid of than people want to admit. And the reason that is because it's, how do I put this? I'm going to put this very gently. There are technologies of faith that work. And there's technologies of faith that you can use power for good or for evil. And so a lot of times when we are not mature in our magic, we can easily be led or told or influenced to use our magic to work against ourselves. Like that's a very dicey, tricky thing. It's like if you're not mature and you can't see certain pitfalls, like you're easy prey to energies that have an agenda around you or about you or in relationship to you, or even like not having anything to do with you, but they see an opportunity to like use what your power might be in order to get vengeance for something else. Like, so we have to be really careful when we take directed action with energy and our power, because we do as projectors have the power to influence the unseen realms with our observation and with our determinations with that observation. And so and especially when we come into agreement, that's a really big thing. So when we think about like these stories, like and the happily ever after, as being it's a dominant myth that we have to work out the nuts and bolts of in order to get from the shadow, like dominance of the ignorance is really what it is. It's the lack of sight. It's the blindness. And that's a position of I am a victim in a lot of ways. And so you always have to start with I am overwhelmed by the circumstances I'm in, and I feel like I have no power over them. That is always where we start, because that starts as overwhelm and a need for more power, more abilities, more insight, where you're drawn to go out and seek answers and seek strength and seek growth so that you can meet the challenge. So whenever we're entering an archetypal story, we are entering at I'm not big enough or I'm insufficient. But we work through that archetype from that place of insufficiency into finding the answers, making the connections. Like there is this aspect of action here when it comes to like being born and getting from point A to point B of existence in your lived experience. So there is this notion of, and I'm getting lost a little bit, so I'm going to try to reel it in. With these dominant myths, like we can lose ourselves to stories that we tell about ourselves. And those are all, again, there's cultural influences around that, and those cultural influences in the positive sense come from like ascended ancestors, in the negative sense come from a distorted, needs to work itself out, shadow aspects. So we have to enter every story knowing that there's a bad part of the story and a good part of the story, not necessarily good and evil. It's duality. It's something has to go from parasitic. It's basically taking your life force and saying, I have more power than you. I am God. You are nothing without me. You know, it's that kind of energy. It is codependent, and it does want to basically get you to like lay down and relinquish all of your power to its influence, which means don't live for you. Don't even live. Give your life force over to me. You close your eyes. You open your eyes, it's 10 years, and all that's happened has been like in a decline of exhaustion. And there's a lot at play there, because we are meant to sort of have to deal with archetypal stories that start all of us, every single one of us. Nobody's special in the category of I've been overwhelmed. Because we need help, and we're meant to seek community. We're meant to seek answers outside of ourselves. That's a mechanism of us going from a position that we're in that's not good into the help that we need. And there's things to overcome, like pride and so on and so forth. So this story about happily ever after, boy meets girl, girl and boy fall in love, get married, have kids, live happily ever after. This archetypal dominant myth that says I am, that says this is the quality of life that you need to form into. This is the experience of life that you need to form into. And one way or another, that was the old worldview. And as we're moving out of that, we have to confront the curses that held that worldview in place. And so like, that's what this Chariot card is about. Something so insidious that we can't see clearly is always going to like be what we're dealing with when we enter in at the shadow. And so the shadow of this story is taking action on escaping being alone. And that being your position of survival and safety. And like this is the family place. This is where you are cared for, taken care of. Your needs are not your own problem. Your needs are the problem of somebody else in one way or another. Like that, I'm seeing that in the shadow first, right? And the reason that I'm seeing that in the shadow first is because we have to start at like the part of the story that says that happily ever after requires another person. Right there, we have an issue. And it's important to sort of like take a deep breath and realize that that does not say you're not going to get what you want when it means being in relationship to another person. It says that you don't get to need another person for your own survival. Your survival does not need to be in the hands or the responsibility of another person. Now this is tricky because mothering and being a mother means that you have to there's something to do with like, for you to be able to take care of the children, you need a type of support that enables you to. And so like, that's where this Queen of Pentacles and the Strength card come in, because we have to go at the story. We can't be like kid gloving it because there's so much invested in the story itself. When you have a story where you formed your way into it, where you formed by that story's promise, to challenge its promise and to challenge that story over your life, it's going to be like taking away the limerence. And if you take away the limerence, then how are you going to soothe yourself, right? So if we take away the limerence and we give you the real situation, there's an emotional thing that happens. And I kind of want us all to be a little bit prepared for this when we go into these stories, these dominant myths. You have an emotional investment in a dominant myth most of the time, because you're formed by it. So when I go in to say, the limerence of your ideal, like your idolizing of the romantic happily ever after story, like if it's only real in limerence, if you can't make it real in reality and it only exists in a dishonest kind of a place where you're dishonest with yourself and you're pushing a dishonest sort of position in order to prolong your state in limerence, if you're not living, and in lieu of living, you're consuming a story that like pumps your body full of certain kinds of like disassociative feelings of romantic infatuation, that's more like an addictive drug kind of behavior where you're in love with the idea of love. You're in love with the concept of love and the chemicals that come from this sort of experience where you're having this experience by yourself. This is different than an experience you would be having with the person you'd be in relationship with, working out that relationship in relation and talking and speaking and interacting in agreement with the participation of that other person with you is the agreement for the growth of this third like entity that is like a relational dynamic between you. If it's all just with you, and you're in that space in your mind and with energy and with projecting and with making decisions and figuring things out based on slivers and slices and like little droplets of information instead of like a full-blown interaction, you're participating in something that is using your like very honest need for connection and love, taking that honest need for connection and love and enslaving it to a story that might have nothing to do with you, may or may not be true for you, or if it is true for you, it's true for you in a unique way and not in a general way. And there's like, and the only way that it's true, the only way that it has truth is if it's based in interaction, not in infatuation. So when we think about our survival and when we think about our growth and we think about what we are formed by and with, and like there's a lot here about the process of becoming solid, the process of finding your voice, the process of forging connections with other people and forging connections with aspects of divinity and forging connections with avenues of expression. Boots on the ground. You know, sometimes these messages can be really rough because when we look at this blind spot here, it's talking about the shadows exist in the parts of the story that we ignore willfully by way of our own like demands, either in terms of like, we can look at this. Let's go. Because this is like, oh, this was one of the harder ones I've ever done. Like this, this feels hard. It really does. Because when it comes to sustaining ourselves, when it comes to having our needs actually met and the deprivation that we're faced with, when we confront these dominant myths, we have to first understand that for every dominant myth, there is a counterfeit. And then there is like the experience itself, I keep on wanting to use the word reality, but I think reality means, I'll tell you why I want to use the word reality. Reality means like almost in a certain kind of way, corporally agreed upon blank, you fill in the blank, that we in coherence agree upon a standard that forms reality. And so like an agreed upon, that's also about consent. You know, when we have these systems of, there's mining of limerance. The energy of limerance is delicious. You know it because you experience it. Now, we're going to ask more about that, you know, but basically like it's also just pure sugar. And so if you use that's a really interesting thing. I'm hearing like, if you use it all up, like it's an ingredient, you know what I mean? Like that's a very strange thing. So I'm seeing limerance as being sugar and limerance as being an ingredient that like we are capable of creating and using, and that it has a use and that it has a place. And that if we spend too much time just like consuming the sugar and we don't get any other nutrients, then when we go to try to apply, oh, this makes sense with that parable with the lamp oil. I never really understood it. I'm thinking about a parable with the lamp oil. It's like it's a Bible parable. But anyway, if the limerance is like spent not in experience, then when you get to the experience and you don't know, where's the limerance? Where's the magic in the experience? Like it's a very interesting thing that I'm seeing here. And so we have these resources of creativity, and we're meant to not, you know, part of what a shadow thing is a shadow is like a codependence. Like there's that attachment and the codependence that we saw with this mythology, with this false story, and with feeling states that were like basically like when we were given the example, and I think again there's a Greek myth somewhere where you like go to the party and it's like so much fun, but then you can never leave. That's kind of like trying to maintain a homeostasis that is not in a lot like the true to what you really are, like is yeah, there's an addictive quality there. And so I just got lost. I felt the weight of this reading hit me because I know that like the concept of community is really difficult right now for a lot of people, and the deprivation is meaningful. I mean, I think that's what we're looking at in the way of a challenge here. So let's keep on going because I want to see where this is leading us. Because when it comes to this story of boy meets girl, or boy meets boy, or girl meets girl, whatever, love stories, we're getting, you know, when it comes to the story of the happily ever after, is somebody else responsible for your happiness? Is having a certain kind of story about love in your life responsible for your happiness? Or are you responsible for your happiness? Like, we put our hearts in the hands of false gods, and then we don't understand why God abuses us. That was never a God in the first place. That was an energy that was lulling you into a complacency about inaction so that they could live through your projection almost against reality, so that they could share a space with you where they were getting to manipulate and participate in your energy instead of being a support to the energy and its growth in its own right. And, you know, when I look at death and rebirth, and when I look at, you know, that infinity sign and that progress from shadow into light, it's always about, where are you going to position yourself in the body of the whole? Are you going to position yourself as a parasite that breaks things down and consumes them, and is and all that does is consume and consume and consume and consume and consume? Or are you going to be a part of what builds things up? Are you going to be on an ascension track, or are you going to be on a consumption track? Because that's what the underworld is. It's the part of the life and death and rebirth cycle point when hungry, like think about it, the death of an animal. First, the spirit departs, and then it's only about hunger for the energies that are around the energy that is being broken down. And so the energies that are in charge of doing the breaking down, their purpose is breaking down, and their purpose is breaking down to consume. So are you going to be a part of that story, which is very hierarchical? Who gets fed? Whoever is the best at breaking down and subjugating. Or the part of the ascension, which is taking responsibility for your life force and making sure that that life force is in relationship to what is building, what is creating, what is nurturing. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here. You know, the happily ever after, the shadow aspect is consuming, having not enough in a relationship with just one other person and needing desperately for them to meet all of your needs and requiring them for your survival. That's not a love story. Possessing one person, and when you possess one person, like, you belong to me and I am the master, what that means is your life force is now mine and I will allocate it in service of my goals. That's parasitic. We're meant to interact with each other in such a way that we are able to, like, participate in each other's bounty. We are able to share, give, and take. But when we start taking a position where, like, we make ourselves the main character in someone else's experience, like, that's dangerous. That's a parasitic position. You know what I mean? And like, and I didn't want this, like, I'm worried because this reading is like coming in very, very hard, because what Spirit is saying is there's a grief, there's a grieving of the spirit at the limited amount of like where people's energies and people's intimacies and people's experience of growth in each other and community, like, it's not free. It's bound in this dominant myth that says happily ever after is not your, it's about somebody else seeing you in a certain way. It's not about you seeing your, there's something there. So let's keep on going, because, you know, we have to be in relationship, and we have to be, and we want to be in relationship, and we want to be in good relationship. Queen of Wands, look at the bottom of the deck. I don't think I looked at the bottom of the deck. I don't think I pulled cards out of this deck, but that Queen of Wands is like a fiery tongue, you know, and I do feel like there is an aspect with this reading that is fiery tongue. But we have to be making decisions, you know, that we're born with potential, and whether that potential becomes something that we get to be the beneficiaries of, and the people around us get to be the beneficiaries of. If that potential isn't benefiting us and others, then it's being used by something else. And even if the only thing that is using your potential is the stories that you are telling about yourself that are going to come true, that you're taking no action, on participating with the universe that makes things in interaction. So like, this is really hard. This is really tough. There's some really challenging things here where it's pushing, it's a comfort zone. It's a love affair. It is a deep love with the energy of a codependent, like parasitic story, because being consumed feels good. We want to be like, and that's part of the thing that we're not taking into account. Being consumed as a story is something that we want to experience when we call that love. That's not what love is. That's a false god. So it's a false idol. And if we're participating with not real, we're not participating with. And so let's get into, I feel like this is one of the harder messages that we've ever, because especially if you have magic, so much magic, that your capacity for dreaming and moving into spaces that are ethereal with the moon card here. Spirit is saying, I want you to use your magic. I want you to use these faculties of belief, and I want you to use these faculties of imagination for the purpose of creating expression, and taking that expression and using that expression to connect to the world of where wealth is. Because wealth is all wealth, all wealth. All wealth is in connection. So Spirit is saying, I don't want you starved of connection. I want to give you wealth. So if it's the stories that keep you starved, that you don't need to go out there, that nobody out there is safe, that there's nothing to do, that the third space is online. The third space is online, but what does it mean then to be there? And we're working it out like nobody really knows. And there's no tyranny of urgency that you need to know tomorrow. But part of the story that we're in, the shadow aspect of a story that says, you know, a culture of like isolationist, and where everything is in service of some hierarchy, some status. And the hierarchy and the status are dependent on the stories. They're dependent on the dominant myths. So if we can never challenge the dominant myths and the relationships, even the loving, deep love relationships we have with those dominant myths, those are our value systems. That's everything. And so with the Three of Cups being about community and the Nine of Pentacles being about an individual success, let's see what Spirit wants to tell us about that. Because, you know, dealing with this happily ever after, the first aspect of this myth that needs to be debunked is that one person can responsibly handle your life, your happiness. And it's not really all about happiness. And that's another aspect of the happily ever after that needs to be like disqualified. But, you know, to the extent that we are enslaved to these myths, we value our lives based on whether or not we have these things that we are told are what we value in life. What we are told we value in life. Death of God is about debunking that. It's a very painful experience. But, you know, with this universe card here, this is like the world card. The action being taken on the isolation that has come of a myth of happily ever after that's dependent on competition. Whew, that's where we have a major curse. Because competition and supremacy are arm in arm, and comparison is arm in arm with competition and supremacy. And when you see someone that you value more than yourself, you know what? There's a recipe there. When you see someone that you value more than yourself, that you think has something more than you have, that you think is more special than you are, that will last as limerence until it starts to become you owe me. What does you owe me mean? It means you start to disqualify the person. You start to compare yourself, and in realizing that there's no difference between you and them, and that why are they there and you are there, you start to demean them. These are all like insidious tentacles of like a spirit of jealousy, evil eye, That means that nobody can just show up in full like regalia of like their favorite colors and their loudest song, because that level of expression, if it's existing next to you, is taking away your something. And now everybody has to conform to some sort of homeostasis that is completely dishonest in order to appease your inner tyrant that feels inferior to someone else. And so this is why we can't find love or acceptance if that's the way that we're coming at people, as feeling inferior. So inferior is a very like serious thing, because you're not inferior. The premise is all wrong. It's fruit of a poison tree. And so when we go into this Queen of Pentacles and the Strength card, let me get some cards on that, because things are changing quickly, thankfully. And with the High Priestess and the Ace of Wands, like this, there's women holding power in every way. And I don't mean that to like upset the men. Like, let me explain. There's no comparison. There's no competition. We're stepping out of a hierarchical formation. We're not in formation. We're not marching. We're not taking orders. We're not coming into compliance as a show that we can be trusted. There's a whole shift, a massive amount of change coming our way, a landslide of it. We're all going to be okay. But where we enter the story in the Akashic Records is upheaval. And that's because what we valued, we no longer value, which means that we have no compass. When we have no compass, we have a lot of people demanding that their way is the only way. And the reason that the world is not going as they would like it to go is because of other people not believing and doing as they do. And it becomes the war of supremacies, which is just a world war to the end. And so we're not going to participate in that. It's like one of the bravest things that you can do. And so like the love story, you know, when we think about the dominant myths that rule us within and without, the worldviews that hold us captive, that we have to move our way through. We have to shed these love affairs that we have with stories that aren't true and hurt us. We are in an alliance with a belief that if we find somebody and we have that person, that we are better and like in compliance, and like now we're going to be okay and things are going to be, we need that person in order to have happiness, in order to have a good life. To do it on our own isn't great. And you know that in your heart, that connection is where you grow, and opportunities, you know, for growth come in connection. So you know community is needed. But when we see that community is like misaligned, and the way the community is formed is in a hierarchical step in place, you know, when all of those values that we would have to like agree with in order to be in that dishonest harmony, when all that's falling apart, and it is, then in order not to become the despair, in order not to land in the part of the lifespan and life experience and purpose, you know, because we have the world, the womb world, where we're formed through stories that allow us to work out what we become in, you know, through these traits that are given to us with this body and the stories that made this body. We move into that next field at a certain point. We stop reincarnating at a certain point, and we become deified in the form that we took ultimately in terms of purpose. And if we didn't take some form in purpose, then we're going round and round and round and round, going on that loop over and over again, having to be born over and over again until we get to it. Because the alternative is not ascending, not crossing over, and being the part of the universe, the part of existence, the part of this world that is about breaking down what is life in order to make new life with that material. And so if there was no purpose that ever arose and the entire experience was consuming and being consumed, then that is where we see these spirits that seem to be relegated in hell. All they have is hunger. All they have is thirst and rank and file. And if you're not consuming, you're getting consumed. That's all there is. that is a world, and it's funny, you know, when you interact with these fourth dimensional, you know, and energies that didn't cross over, they think that's the whole world and that they're doing good to sort of get up in rank. But that is hell, and it's the hell that we leave, and the ascension of the whole leaves digestion behind in a certain kind of way. Like we see that because death and rebirth cycle is for this world, for working it out. And so with the High Priestess and the Ace of Wands being about like something that is being born of the rubble of the stories that are crumbling, that there's a new dominant myth coming in. And that new dominant myth is going to form in the chaos and in the disorientation. And so there's a new story to participate in. And that's sort of what we're seeing with this dominant myth, and the happily ever after is being revealed as a fraud and a lie and a mechanism of control instead of a promise of unity. Happily ever after is a promise of unity. But if unity is meant to be something that we all participate in as community, then we're getting, that's where the counterfeit says here, this is the answer to that, to the call of that need. And then the reality that answers, you know, is either subjugation and trying to make something true that isn't, or realizing this isn't, this story as it's told does not deliver that outcome. And so we need to have a new story that replaces it, that will get us further along in our own personal evolution, and then more broadly in like a broad evolution. And so it's like, we don't have to give up on romantic love. But the demon that says the only way to get happily ever after is with codependence with me and giving me all of your power so that we can make the story that I'm telling come true. That's a trick. That's magic, bad magic. That's a bad spell. Somebody did a spell that caused some kind of like a hierarchical thing with this. And so, you know, we're looking at this part of your Akashic Records where what we're needing to work out is where your allegiance and your agreement leave stories that position you as powerless or, well, let's get some more, because I don't want to, you know, that seems like that's not the answer to love, right? You know, because basically Spirit is saying, you know, the promise of actual love, real love, is beyond limerance. You know, it's beyond escapism. And that's the thing, that limerance and that escapism, it can be experienced alone. It can even be experienced with another. But when one partner is trying to maintain that over any kind of growth, then what you end up with is, again, something that just wants to consume that feeling with you, from you, and that's all you're good for, and that's your worth, and that's your value. And whenever you step out of that, suddenly, like, you're trying to grow and you're trying to leave, and like that you have to stay exactly the same so I can eat you. You know, your growth is going to be consumed into my growth. That's what that always is. And so, like, we do have to sort of face that, because that's uncomfortable to face, and that's painful to face. And then a lot of our decisions that we made based on the mythology of any of the dominant myths are the archetypes that we come in on the shadow, false pretenses. We get overwhelmed. I'm not, this is killing me. I'm not enough. Oh my God, I can't. That's the shadow end. It's consuming me and I'm drowning. The light end is I've taken control. I've taken all of the tools that I need that are around me. And sometimes those tools are only your spirit guides. That does happen. There are times when you are like down and out and you have to plug into that intuition, plug into divinity, plug into your spirit guides, plug into God. You know, there's plug into goddess. Like there's all these times when we're not enough, that's going to be your hero's journey call. From the known to the unknown. That's actually the Lover's card. That's like the call to adventure by way of a desire to grow, because where you are, you're either not going to survive it like this. It's not sustainable. You're fooling yourself a little bit. Or, well, that's what that is. Counterfeit is like allegiance to something that isn't really true, but that you are in love with anyway. And whatever you can project into that, instead of saying, wait a minute, I am responsible for creating a different story that is much truer to who I am, what I want, and what is true for me. trying to make a story that's not true for you. And that doesn't mean that you don't need some story structure. You know, like we don't have to throw out all the story structures. We just have to understand that the story structures are the archetypes. There's a shadow end for this. We can write a horror story through that story structure, or we can write a love story through that story structure. We can take any tone or viewpoint that we can project anything into it. So we're being encouraged to think about the energies that we're holding court with, energies that we're serving. Are the energies that are gods in that situation. And the energies that you are serving, are they the ascended ancestors who are saying, hey, we're going to make this better. We're going to work with this. We're going to find like what it is that is of value to you, how that value should or should not be expressed in relation to community. Community is the divine feminine aspect of God. If you have no interest in community, then that's still being very much like consumed by this divine masculine. I'm just me, and all there is me, and I am me, I am me, I am me, and I have me, and I have me, and I have me. Like, this is no referendum against loneliness, because listen, hold on, I have to break in as Lisa Lee because I think I need a softer aspect. Every mystic is isolated at one point or another. They're supposed to be. They're supposed to be isolated. It's how you get pushed into the other world. But leaving that isolation is a part of the mystic's journey that not everyone is able to make. Some mystics get consumed in the cave and they never make it out. And that's fine. You know what I mean? But understand that you want to make these decisions knowingly. You don't want to close your eyes in meditation and wake up and find out that you've only been in the cave your entire life, and maybe you wanted to venture out, but you got so immersed. And some people, that's fine. Again, like, there's not a right or a wrong way, but when we look at these stories and we think about the stories as being related to growth, and I think all really mature spirituality is related to growth. If you're not growing, then you're hiding. And so we have to ask these questions. We have to look at where we have an allegiance to not growth, because that's an allegiance to energies of consumption. Like, you know, it's not about, and there's no punishment, and there's no wrong or right, and there's no shaming with any of this. And because the bristles start bristling when you confront people about growth and they are determined to stay parasitic. What if they love it? This is kind of a thing, you know? Yeah, I felt that resistance. I felt that rigidity, and I felt that calcification around the heart. This is this is like this duality. Like, I have to be right. If I'm not right, then who am I? If I'm not right about you being wrong, then who am I? Where am I? And what does it mean to be figuring out anything? Comfort zones are like scary, but when we think about dominant myths, like, you know, dominant myths happen to all of us. You know, we all find ourselves being consumed into something else's agenda, consumed into something else's image, and it feels like love when you don't have a sense of what you are entitled to and what it does mean to have love freely. Love with conditions of subjugation is not love freely. Whether you're the one making edicts about subjugation or they're the ones making edicts about subjugation, codependence in and of itself is a subjugating force of dishonest love. Because that's about, we both agree to stay in consumption with each other and only grow with each other and not grow in relationship to the world. We're going to carve ourselves out into like something that is you're going to get to a point with this where you start to panic because the part of your soul that has sovereignty and won't give that sovereignty up and knows that it can't and it shouldn't, because you're meant to have sovereignty. Your consciousness isn't supposed to be consumed. You'll just go back again. That's going to be reincarnation. It's fine. To kind of work out what it means for you to finally recognize enough of what you are that you can responsibly, in the next realm, determine your purpose. As long as you're going round and round and round, expanding with each pass, you're expanding into a better sense of yourself, a better sense of your purpose, a better sense of your placement. And yes, sometimes for some souls, where they choose to be the cradle that they want to be rocked in, is consuming. And that's okay. But if you're not okay with being consumed, and if you don't want to consume, this is where it creates a major rift. And this can be very hard to sort of negotiate. And so what does a healthy love really look like with this High Priestess Ace of Wands? Because that Ace of Wands is hot and sexy in this context. The hot and sexy High Priestess. Like, let's find out what that means, because with the Six of Swords, we're moving into calmer waters. This Knight of Pentacles is like one step at a time, because nobody really knows how to be where we're going yet. We're still figuring it out. We're still working it out. And, you know, we're having to use like symbols and stories, which is fine, you know. But I want to come back to this because, you know, I think we did the work of looking at what we didn't want to look at, you know, and I think we've identified the manipulation. But what we haven't identified is, without that story, what do we have to aspire to? What do we have to base our value on? If your whole status is like in relationship to the relationship that you're in, like, because there's a lot of traps, the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like, we're in all kinds of traps related to relating to each other, because relating to each other has been mediated by an unholy force. Now, that's an interesting thing that I'm seeing. The shadow aspect of divine feminine. So the divine feminine aspect of God. The shadow aspect is not letting your children grow and consuming their lives for your own worship, attention, tyranny, manipulation, playing with someone else's life, disqualifying their experience and their voice and their own agency to serve you. The purpose of them is for you. So that's the dark feminine. It's a consuming aspect. Moving through that archetypal story into a light aspect is nurturing the growth of others, having a positive regard, which means that you're not looking at people and putting them on trial in relationship to your self-appointed expertise on everything, and then positioning yourself. Like, that's not cooperative building up honest harmony. In order for you to be in a place where, gosh, because I'm hearing critique, the word critique. The master critiques. If you've mastered something, you critique. If not, you're trying to position yourself. If not, there's even an aspect of destiny swapping that goes with that. So don't do it. You know, like, and that's like, that's a very specific message that I'm getting, I guess, for like some very specific reason. But what I'm seeing here in terms of like where your liberation comes in, where you're a part of a world that is building up, that is healing, that is strong enough to like lift and hold others to an extent. Because we have to deal with the martyr salvation dominant myth at a certain point, you know, because that gets in our way. Everything that is related to hierarchy, like, you know, it is problematic when you think about a body that has to work in cooperation. And so when we talk about love stories and falling in love and finding our place in community and existing in full expression of ourselves for the whole world to see, energies like that are feeling inferior are just as much participants as energies that are feeling superior. Because again, if I see something in you that I think is better than me, that the refrain is always going to be, you owe me, because at the very heart of it, we know that we're all connected as equals. And that's just a faulty thinking that you're bringing in relationally, and not just you, everyone. Like, we're talking about disempowering an entire archetypal dominant myth, disempowering an entire false god that everyone has been like conditioned to serve. And so this part of the Akashic Records is confusion. Like, okay, well, if it's dethroned, then who do I serve? What do I serve? How am I finding my value? What does it mean to be in love? What does it mean to want to have a role in the world? Whew, lovers. So the Lover's card is moving out of the story that you were told or the house that you grew up in and the authority that you came under in order to move into your own authority, establish your own house, and mature and become an adult. In relationship to others, the world, and your position. So with the fire, the King of Wands here, this fiery, like mastering your passions is the King of Wands. He has mastery over the passions. The Death card is about transformation and the Sun card is about clarity. And the Lover's card indicates like a growing up that you want to do. You don't want to look at all of the false promises of false gods and think that there are no promises from real gods. The false god of happily ever after is a false promise, but that doesn't mean that the desire of your heart for connection, position, and community, and the fullness of your own potential and the fullness of your own expression and a crystallization of your authentic you, self-actualization, that is what'll bring you satisfaction. That's going to be satisfying. That's going to be good. That's going to be the kind of regard that you enjoy getting, and there's no slavery in it because you don't need it. It's given freely. Like that happily ever after, that means I need somebody else in order to complete my picture of happiness, is a story that's not true, but that doesn't mean that a position of I am satisfied in my own happiness because I've taken responsibility and I've looked at the stuff that's not working, it's not making me happy, and I've found ways, I've used that magician's toolbox to take everything that I can see around me and place my faith in my ability to make something of it. Participating with all the spirit guides that are around you. In reimagining what it is to come and then be actively in life. I lost that for a minute there because it was so overwhelming. This is literally overwhelming. So we step out of duality, when we step away from this rigidity that says this is who I am and this is the character I'm playing. And I don't know why it's so angry, because I feel this energy of frustration from guidance systems that are really working with people with this energy of self-reliance. That's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I don't know. So but this death and rebirth is about gaining mastery over your own passions and being fueled by them, finding a way to be fueled by your passions into greater connection, and into partnership. Now, partnership is what we're talking about overall with all of this stuff. We are dethroning the dominant myth of the happily ever after, but seeking intimacy, seeking partnership, somebody to co-create, intimately with, is a part of life. And so, this is sanctuary. Creating sanctuary with another is not the same as owning another. Is not a same as possession of another. Partnership with another means we've created a sanctuary where we can be sick, where we can be tired, where we can be in need of attention, and where we can express our needs, and where our needs can be met as a priority in cooperation with others. We can seek sanctuary in relationship in that way. It's something that is built over time in agreement. That's fine. But that's very different than you come under my control or we negotiate with control and somebody always has to be right and somebody always has to be wrong. That's something, you know what I mean? We do have to sort of work with where cooperation is not always agreement. We'll look at that. We're going to look at that another time. But with what we're looking at here in terms of this death and rebirth, what it means for you to invest in your passions, work with your passions, take dominion over your passions, move to gain mastery, let your passions work for you and work in service for you. There is a death and rebirth that has to come in. There is an endurance and a keep going because we're not fully at clarity yet. we have to sort of like invent a new story. I mean, that's sort of what it means to dethrone a god, to dethrone a dominant myth, that, you know, that shame comes in. Honor the divine masculine. So that's agency. Divine masculine energy is agency. And with divine sensuality, making love and erotica, gosh, our guides can be like so hard on me. You know, they can bring things. Sometimes this is one of those messages where the whole time I'm kind of like I want to turn around and be like, what are we doing? But this is what they're saying. They're saying there is a desire for the energy of agency and the energy of reception to be in a kind of honest harmony. We're not talking about being not in harmony, and we're not talking about doing it all our own, and we're not talking about just having community and not having partnerships. We're not sacrificing one for the other. We are finding a way to create sanctuary in relationship with each other, because we want that divine masculine energy of agency to be there for us when we need to be receptive, when we have to receive. And we want that partnership to be established. And we also want to be like a nurturing place for the energy of agency to build and create from as well. So this is a balance that we're trying to strike here. And Spirit is saying, you know, in terms of the Akashic Records and your Akashic Records, this is something that you want because it's your birthright, but you are unique. The Selkie in her skin, reclaiming your authenticity. The way that this is expressed, the way that sexuality is expressed, the way that intimacy in relationship is expressed, the way that you come into honest harmony in relationship through intimacy and with romantic love that is not the counterfeit codependence. Codependence is the promise of subjugation, you know. And so Spirit is saying, like, you know, what we stand in with our authenticity is a unique expression of our love and our falling in love, and what it means to express love and be expressed and receive the expressions of love related to like how we express, like all of that's like a beautiful harmonious thing. But we only get fed in that position from a place of complete and total authenticity. And authenticity at its finest, at its most solid, is something that's not really negotiating in exchange for love. It's not negotiating itself away. It's not negotiating its power away. And we don't really know what that means, but Spirit is saying you have a divine masculine. You have a place where this expression is going to be something that gives you energy, that gives you life, that builds into the structure of what it is that you create from sanctuary from. But it's reliant on your sense of your own sovereignty, which means that you are not in relationship for like in exchange in some way or another. You're standing on your own in one way or another in that solid place. That doesn't mean that you can't be interdependent. It means that you should not be dependent. There's some aspect of like knowing what's going on. Like I can't see it. It's like something with consent. So we're getting here with the story in the Akashic Records with what's being worked out through our, you know, this passage through this archetype with these energies in this way. I'm going to look so that we have something happy with this reading. I'm going to look at what Spirit wants us to think about in terms of the love that we can have, the kinds of love that we can participate in. What does it make sense to have those? Because we have talked about, you know, limerance in the absence of another, not the answer. Limerance with another as the only state of harmony is tyranny. And then, you know, interaction without any of that energy of like limerance, it gets dry. So like, what are we going to do? You know what I mean? Like when the story that it was agitating, like a place to facilitate an acting out of feelings, in absence of that, like, what do we have? So let's get that, because we need to know. We need to know. there is somebody who, like, I'm, you know, so Spirit is saying, like, you know, the where we enter this on the personal level. We enter this at the level of your Akashic Records. So where we enter this at the level of your Akashic Records, let's talk about this King of Wands energy that is passionately divine masculine, like in pursuit, and this death and rebirth, which means like whatever that meant has to go for something else to take its place. And we are going to be really happy with the power of this, and like you're giving up the false God's desire for you in order to step into the true God's sense. Oh yeah, of course. I love it. Look, so when it comes to this, honor the masculine and divine sensuality, making love and erotica, and respecting men, embracing the masculine divine aspects, and like yourself and then and others, we have to get rid of this. I didn't even see it, like popped out at me like way at the end. I saw this whole other kind of scene, but this really is, this is what I think that the traditional, like non, you know, intuition interpretation is. In order for us to move into a new place, we have to take the counterfeit. What is counterfeit? What is not divine masculation? Divine masculine is not subjugating. Divine masculine is not hierarchical. Divine masculine is not possessive. And divine masculine doesn't ask for your life in exchange for, you know, their growth, their stability. Divine partnership is something else. I mean, we get that everyone has to look at individually, but like as we look at what it means to let go of the happily ever after, dominant myth, the archetypal shadow aspect, and step into the truth, the real divine masculine. Either being the real divine masculine or being in relationship to the divine masculine, just depending on who's hearing it. That is what we're looking at here. Is a transformation around that. So yeah, let's look at it. Let's find out. And I'm going to take a little break. You won't feel it. I'll be right back. Okay. I did not know this message was going to be like so hard hitting. Oh my gosh. Nor did I really think it was going to take quite the form that it did. I really felt like lovey-dovey, like story was going to come through. And I think it's going to come through now at this juncture after I think we've all been like, I feel like sort of spanked, you know what I mean? Because divine masculine energy is pursuit. And I'm used to my guides talking to me about like my pursuit being broken, like the divine masculine aspect of myself that is pursuit, and go get it and fight for it. Like all that stuff is always like, you know, leave that to somebody else. You know what I mean? But this is, so I'm used to thinking of it more like impersonally, but Spirit is sort of showing me that like that is linked to like being desired, like the desire to be desired. Like there's desire, you know, it's all kind of like together with desire. So it's not just like a faculty of like personal assertiveness around, it's actually like filters into all aspects of life. So this was harder for me to hear than I realized it was going to be, because it was really more about like accepting growth. Accepting intimacy is expressing growth, and accepting growth. And look at the shaman there popping out. So I want to we're going to move into like a better part of this story. One where we say, okay, so if not love, if love that is like not real love is, if that's not something that's in store for me, because it was never real to begin with, the happily ever after is a dominant myth that like isn't actually how it pans out. It's so limited, and it's trying to it's exploiting limerance. It's trying to make limerance love, and limerance can never be love. So let's find out what love actually is. Since with the moon here, it seems like it's hard to tell. Tell me about love for this collective as we move into the Akashic Records. What do they need to know about their love story? Because when we enter a story or an archetypal story, like the seed of desire to have that partnership, that sanctuary, that's right. Let's see the new story. Oh, okay, sisterhood and Coral's wisdom. We're gonna see a love story here that is so different than we thought. Okay. Because it's not like you can't have limerance. You can. Let's see. Ooh, yearning on the bottom of the deck. With this longing for someone, undesired separation, and pining. So one of the first things that we want to look at when we look at the return of Aphrodite, temple, birth of a goddess, guidance, goddess energy, treating as sacred. Sacred does not yearn like necessarily. Like there's something interesting about like we're flipping the picture, we're changing the picture. I got that wrong. It's not that sacred doesn't yearn. It's that what is sacred yearning, like what is sacred, that desire that is placed in your heart to be loved, understood, to grow in intimacy and sanctuary with another, that is you're going to do that. That desire is planted there as a potential that you're meant to actualize. If you are not meant to actualize that desire would not be so strong. That desire would be not there. That's true. Your guys are saying like this is a point of faith and a point of trust, but if you are not meant to have it, it would not be a driving force in your life. So the exploitation, I almost said exploitation, the exploitation of a driving force in your life is what that counterfeit happily ever after was trying to, like that was its edge. When you understand that you don't have to throw that out, that's a part of yourself. You don't have to bury that hope. That hope doesn't even go with that story anymore, the one that didn't work out. There's a new way of expressing this and experiencing this that says the yearning is totally right. Going about it in a way that is like begging for mercy is not. I heard something crash, even though nothing crashed. I feel like something sort of did. With sisterhood, friendship, allies, compatible souls, loyalty, joy, and delight, and corals, wisdom, colony, delicacy, fragility, works that are created over great periods of time, dreams, vivid dreaming, dream messages, dream teaching, and the return of Aphrodite, temple, birth of a goddess, guidance, goddess energy, and treating as sacred. So the first thing that we want to know or sort of establish to a certain extent, and for everyone this is very different, is that this is sacred, that like intimacy and creating sanctuary and intimacy is something that takes time and is delicate and it's fragile. I'm going to get some tarot cards for right below all of this so that I can see what the tarot has to say about it. Queen of Swords, Seven of Wands. Oh, this is good. Oh, this is cool. Okay, I'm seeing where this is going. This is going to be a long reading. That's all right. And the Wheel of Fortune. Yep. Cool. This one's... So the Three of Pentacles is about building a cathedral, and the sisterhood is about building the kind of cathedral where the values, what is valuable in life. So these happily ever after stories, if it's just boy meets girl and that's happily ever after, that's what's valuable in life. That's the goal. If you get that, everything else is solved. That's the promise. If you're a good person and you do the right things and you sing the right songs and you adhere to the right standards, then you will have this and you will be happy. If not, shame. Now, we're debunking that myth. We no longer believe that. But when it comes to creating a new story that we can step into, one of the first aspects that we're seeing here with the Three of Pentacles and sisterhood and like this return of Aphrodite and this world card here, and we also have the Wheel of Fortune. So we're talking about a major shift in what we value. And so if we value friendship, allies, compatible souls, loyalty, and joy and delight, this is what's valuable in a relationship. And Three of Pentacles saying, build a structure where these valuable things are like what is invested in. Competition with the evil eye, again, like I'm trying to work it out, you know, because I have, these ancestral curses, like that's a big one for my heritage. The evil eye in Greek heritage, again, you can't go anywhere without the jewelry and these practices of like actively participating with belief in a curse that says that if you have something of value, somebody is going to punish you for that. that is what is a very real thing. It's such a real thing. It's like not even funny, you know, and it makes it very hard to go out there and like, and be vulnerable and find community. It's an attack against community, which means it's an attack against the divine feminine, which means that it's when we look at the archetypal story of the divine feminine, that there's a mothering aspect. There's maiden, mother, crone. And in order to go through that cycle properly and exist in relationship to that story, the mother, the part of maiden to mother is you learn how to mother yourself. You take care of yourself. You are the mother of yourself. And as the mother of yourself, you often are the mother of others. But you can't mother others unless you can mother yourself. That's a position of authority. And so when we look at the dark aspect, the aspect of divine mother in the archetype that is in the shadow, it's I'm not letting you grow so that you stay here with me. You are born in service of me. And so when we relate to the women around us, how are you in service to me? Are you feeding me? Are you taking care of me? I perceive you to have something. So when I tell you that I have a need, you're supposed to give to me. You're not living up to your, the position that you have because I'm not getting what I want. Woof. That shadow needs to be shaken out. That evil eye is if you have something, you're going to get punished because you're not going to be better than me. That comes back to what we were talking about before in terms of like this big aspect of this happily ever after that needs to be debunked is positioning with each other in relationship to status of relationships, right? So if you have a partnership, a romantic partnership, then that's a status. That's a type of relationship that's coveted, that's wanted. And if you don't have it and somebody else has it, then there's something wrong with the world that's not making it possible for you. No. All that stuff. It's in comparison. It's seeing something that someone else seems to have and then valuing it as something that you're valuing more than what you have available to you. But when our values and what we value is spread out, then it doesn't fall on one other person to give our life significance or to nurture our life. It falls on community. And if it falls on community, if nurturing our life falls on community, then the interpersonal, intimate relationships that we have with each other are free. And that's where the sanctuary and the romance can be built over time. It can be fragile. It's created, love is created by a colony of people who make it possible to explore that in a healthy, safe way, because dependence and ownership aren't a part of the equation, because partnership does not rely on falling in rank. And the only way for us to do that is to invest in a net in community that isn't valuing the relationships that we have with a romantic partner above the relationship that we have with friends. Getting some of those needs met with friends. And then Limerance lives properly with a romantic kind of relationship that doesn't have to fill all of your needs. The person that you fall in love with might not be so great at certain things that they don't need to be excellent at in order to support your needs. Because your needs are spread out over community. This is a weird twist on love stories, right? But basically Spirit is saying, to defend love, to really defend an offer of love, it has to be free, freely given, freely received. There can't be any coercion. There can't be coercion. And there can't be bargaining and negotiating. And you need to bargain and negotiate when there's finite resources. But when you are resourced, when you don't need anything, the experience of love can be more young and guided by interest and guided by curiosity, because the stakes don't have to be so high. The stakes don't have to be, are you going to take care of me when I'm sick? Are you going to have the resources to be like able to foster my growth? Because your growth is fostered by community. Your health is always assured by way of community and safe. And so that creates a kind of like situation with love where love demands aren't being made of love that aren't belonging, demanding of love. The obligation is not, is nothing has to die on the cross of obligation or obedience in order for love to be actualized or achieved or experienced. It has to be free, which means we have to make it so. And so when we look at that Nine of Pentacles and the Wheel of Fortune, you know, it's not, you have to be independent and take care of yourself and have no needs in order to not be a strain on a relationship. That's bullshit. That's not what we're saying. We're saying in order to not be a strain on like a relationship with one person, you need to be in relationship with a community of people. Everyone, every single person. That the only obligation is to have like your, this is hard. You know, when I look at this, you know, I'm looking at it from a position of the world that we're in, the options that we have, all of dishonest harmony that flies around, all of the comparison and the cut you down, and like the way people orient. It's supremacy is such an evil, sneaky monster because it exists just as much in I'm better than you as you're better than me. Just as much as like, that's both places. Or you think you're better than me. That's a projection. That's shaming. As much as like, I think I'm better than you or you think you're better than me. Same thing. Same demon wearing a different hat. It's a projection that we place on people that gives us an expectation that they owe us or that we are owed. And like none of that, that's all shame driven. That's all that dark aspect of community instead of the light aspect of community. So we're talking about working our way through dominant myths and working our way through archetypes, and the archetype of the divine feminine aspect of God needs to be self-sufficient, but that doesn't mean alone. Needs to be independent, but that doesn't mean without support because of this freedom aspect. And that's, so community has a lot of jobs that community was never given. And if community did those jobs, then that opens up an opportunity for love to thrive and grow harmoniously. And what we have here with this Nine of Coins, this Four of Coins, and the Six of Coins is about give and take and generosity. You know, the reality of people don't have it all to give, and the Hanged Man is like, and I guess that means that the whole world starves. With the Queen of Wands here, you know, this is something that we struggle with, I think, with divine feminine aspects of God and divine femininity. It is community. You have a divine masculine aspect of yourself that isn't community, but the divine feminine aspect of yourself is community. And we are very quick to starve our divine feminine in service of love, the pride of the divine masculine aspect of ourselves that says, you know, I don't need anyone. And the way we play out these stories on an internal level is fascinating to me, because independence is not the enemy, you know, and being called to independence is like being given a prize. It's not related to obligation and obedience. It's related to like holding a strength. And the Four of Pentacles is kind of like holding yourself together with not enough. So we have to contend with, you know, looking at romantic love, looking at falling in love, looking at being in love in relationship to all of the demands that are put on that relationship and that love, and the world that is not facilitating a community that makes it easy or even possible. And when we get angry because we haven't found love, or the love we have found has fallen short, we shouldn't really be angry at the person who is never blame a personal failing on a systemic failing. It's easy to just fight with each other about personal failings when it's a systemic failing that fails us all. And so when we are heartbroken about not finding love or haven't found love, we really need to say, like, what kind of world view, what kind of dominant myth is so powerful that it takes so much that it even takes your opportunity to have a really true experience of love, because you have no demands on you and you're really just like exploring for the fun of it and the happiness of it, and you're not asking this for too much. And so, you know, we are in between times. And so when we look at the Akashic Records, you know, we are in between, like, when being in love meant codependence and dependence. That's a subjugating stance, because gender roles were involved in this way. One takes care of and the other goes out and gets. That happily ever after broke down. And now we have community, has to be built, has to be coherent, has to be cooperative so that we can survive. That's truth. And this hanged man is like, so what do we do with that? We don't have community yet. We don't have coherence and community yet. Yeah, well, that is the problem that we're solving. So the yearning isn't wrong. The infrastructure in terms of what we value and where values need to be placed. Love has to be defended by community, or else it stands undefended and it can fall apart. And that which is trying to consume it for its own purposes can manipulate it, because there is a lack that's created in disconnection, like with ranking, like, and that ranking is in the way. Yeah, the moon with that night. We don't know how to even be independent, because that story that we were told was the way that people basically functioned with creating. And there's competition in terms of worldviews and dominant stories and dominant myths. Like, the old dominant myth is coming up short, and we're all kind of stuck saying, well, that doesn't work anymore. And so what it means to create from that place is work. That's what the dreams are all about. Vivid dreaming, dream messages, dream teaching. This is really divinity's way of coming in and saying, you need divinity's inspiration. You need the psychic arts in order to begin to, like, get in touch with some of these basic human things that predate a structure that blinded us to how they truly operate. Outside of obligation and obedience, how does love even operate? Why do we even, like, you know, and then we can't think of it. Like, it's really interesting because, like, I'm not even going after monotheism at all. I almost tried. I was wanting to say, I wanted to say monogamy, and I said monotheism. That was a really interesting slip. So there's a relationship between monotheism and monogamy. So for us to think of, like, you know, being in love as being in commitment is serving one God, one kind of love above all else, to the exclusion of other types of love, because that's the dominant one. To get our heads out of that, that's so scary, because it leaves us in the world of, like, well, what about, like, gross porn, or what about you know, no rules, and, like, you know, just getting hurt and abused, and like a story that doesn't work and just ends up leaving you worse off. And what about those people who are exploited? Like, there's so much shame mixed in with even considering a thought that says the only way to properly operate in an intimate relationship is if most of your needs are met by community. That doesn't mean most of your sexual needs are met by community. Most of your sexual needs can be made with one partner that you pick, that you create sanctuary with. But divinity is saying these two things, survival and this element of love and creating sanctuary, they shouldn't exist, like, in competition or with each other. Creating sanctuary and making love is something that needs to happen when your needs are all met. And that's confusing, right? It's confusing to me. So, you know, leave your comments. Like, we're all figuring it out, and there's really actually not, like, a dominant, like, anything other than, you know, I like to be this example when I do the work that I do, of, like, I'm just getting out there and I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm expressing myself authentically. And yes, people are going to judge me. You know what I mean? But, like, they're not me, and I'm the main character of my life. They're not, you know, the judge of, like, what it means for me to experience myself, or, you know, like, there's a, you know what I mean? So we all have to kind of understand that, like, community is fraught with so many, like, barbed wires of, if you express yourself, evil eye, spit, you're going to get punished. you know, compliance is going to come in on your head and tell you all the ways that you're not making the grade for the standard that was set. And that's competition here over what's going to take place like in the future, you know, because we have here with this 9 of Pentacles and the Moon, not really knowing how to do this, not knowing what it means to have your needs met and then attend to love as something that you can attend to, like in almost like a Pavlov's order, you know. 4 of Pentacles and the Empress is almost like this is a relationship with divine feminine energy that excludes divine masculine energy somehow. You know what I mean? I kind of feel that like constraint, like not enough. I hear the train whistle too. I don't know, just like, let me just see what it says. Let's see what it says. Give me more information. Because there's a competition here. Oh, right. 4 of Pentacles and the Empress. Again, like not enough, lack. That's going to be the shadow aspect of divine feminine divinity is consumption. You exist to serve me. And the sacrifice of your life for my life and my satisfaction like is like the price that is paid for creation. And we're not doing that. You know, we're not really like we have to be careful about these strengths, because there's a strength in divine femininity that is coming in with the 6 of Coins and generosity. But the Hanged Man and the 8 of Coins means like we are stuck and we have to work with this competition that's like at hand. So Akashic Records wise with love, this is not a great time for love. This is a time to be dreaming up what it would mean to be in sanctuary and safety with another. And the return of the temple and the birth of a goddess and guidance and goddess energy. The divine feminine aspect of God in the way of community like needs to have its proper place for love to operate functionally. Love doesn't operate in submission. And submission and cooperation are not the same thing. So, you know, our Akashic Records right now with this King of Swords is saying action is being taken on, you know, disqualifying a story that was leading everyone, you know, to a place of injustice. But the justice that is happening with love right now is understanding community's place, valuing community properly, putting community where it deserves to be. And in some ways that is demoting sex. 5 of Pentacles, the Devil. Taking our investment from sexual relationships as being fulfillment and taking some of that energy of investment out of prioritizing that related to status, prioritizing that related to like, you know, a happily ever after, a happy life. Disqualifying it as like something that determines whether or not you've failed or succeeded. The devil like plays with this idea of you're going to be alone. Nobody's going to love you unless you find that other person. You're not going to have that place in community. You're not going to be like looked at as somebody who's like, you know, done it right or learned it. You're not going to survive on your own is another one of these like scaries. That's this Devil card. So linking like romantic love to survival enslaves it. And being alone without community is risking your survival. And so it's almost saying that romantic love takes the place of community. That's the false god. So with this Queen of Cups is going to be about like your emotional intelligence coming in to like, that's this action being taken with this King of Swords. It's not, you know, the King of Swords comes from a place of having mastery over the mind. You're being called to not like evacuate your body for your mind, you know, but you are also with the Queen of Cups, there's this balance to be struck between your emotional body and your force of action, force of agency. What do you value in the way of like emotional investment? Let me just get one. This is not the love story. And I think that that's probably it. You know, the way that I'm saying like this is not the love story, 3 of Swords, that we'd all hoped for, 9 of Cups, but with our wish fulfillment on the bottom of the deck, let's do a survey. Let's just do a quick survey. Let's look around. How many of us have given our lives to a story of happily ever after that fell short of being able to sustain that limerence without like life getting in the way and demands getting in the way, and that limerence giving way to a dishonest harmony of obligation and obedience? That doesn't mean that the love isn't strong, and that doesn't even mean that the love is in any way diminished. That love can be crystal clear. But it, like, what we're seeing here is we're meant to disqualify that story, invest in community, so that true love, free of, like, you know, so many demands for survival, can actually bloom. Because right now, this competition, you know, and right here at the bottom of the deck, energy of competition, has us against each other in terms of our own progress. Because if you're making progress and I'm not making progress, and it threatens my survival to be someone who like exists with no progress, then I'm going to hate everyone who's making progress. And that's in every category, not just love. But love, more importantly, speaks to this whole notion of self-worth. And so when the story is, if you don't have that partnership that sustains you, where you're loved and where you're totally understand, if that's not fulfilling all of your needs, oh my God, it's so powerful. I'm like losing it. I gotta find it. I really got knocked off for a second there. Right. Okay, I see. The reason it's so important to get rid of this story that sets the values related to like achievement of these goals as being what makes life valuable or not valuable, when what's valuable at life is look around you, who's near you, and who can you commune with. All of life's riches are in relationships with community, not with like one individual. So like what I'm like getting, oh yeah, okay, here's where it is. I got it. It's going to be so hard to hold because damn, if the opposition doesn't want this to come out. When we talked in the beginning of this reading about parasitic underworld, and that the underworld needs new life, the parasites need new life to continue to eat and consume, and that's all that they do. That's all that they can do. In order to get us to give up on our life, to give up on our ambitions, to give up on what it means to be alive, we have to relinquish desire. To relinquish desire, we have to believe that desire is not for us. To believe that desire is not something that is for us is to begin to slowly die in a certain kind of way. Just to begin to have to just consume where desire is being fed to us, instead of like participating with desire in relation to another, or relation to a project, or relation into something that is facilitating our growth. The opposite of growth is death. And so if somebody's going to convince us to die, convince us to let go of our life force, they have to first convince us that we're not worth anything. And if there is a story that says you're only worth something in this kind of relationship to the life and the world and achievement and others, then and nothing else matters, then it's easy to get you to give up on yourself when that relationship doesn't come through in that way. But when you have community serving like a purpose of meeting your needs, when you have community that validation is spread out over many and experiences of growth and interaction, when you have community meeting all of those needs, it's a lot harder to talk you out of your value than if your value is just with one other person. That is why the counterfeit is to worship one type of relationship, one type of love above all others. It's because if they can get you alone, they can get you to give up. If they can get you to give up, then your only nourishment is coming from what others are producing. And you're not producing you're not having any nourishment by participation. And we got to work on that. That's why we have the Hanged Man and the Eight of Coins here. We got to work on it. Like the love story that we're looking for is not there yet. The yearning is. That's right. The yearning means we got to work on it. The yearning means something's not wrong. Your yearning is right. You're yearning for sanctuary and intimacy. Absolutely right. How do you get there? It's all fucked up. If you don't get there, are you a failure and you should give up on life? Nope. The whole movement, the whole reason why the deprivation exists in the first place is to get us to the foot of that cross where we say, my God, why have you forsaken me? My God, why is the story that I've been telling myself and investing in my whole life failing me? Only then can you see what's really for you in the landscape that's ahead. Only then can you encounter real God. Only then can you encounter real love. When the story fails you, then you can encounter it. But you have to get into that participation by valuing what your guides like can put. Yeah, like there's valuing relationship and community in a whole world that has been talked out of value and community. Queen of Wands. We gotta fight. You know, there is a fight on our hands. We have to fight this story of the broken heart, the enslaved to a shitty ordeal all by ourselves, having to meet our own needs. And when we meet our own needs, we don't have enough because we need a community to meet our needs. And when we don't have a community to meet our needs, we need at least one other person to meet our needs. And then we're really dependent on that person. And we only need that person to, you can't have another person be your foundation. That foundation is going to fall. That tower will hit, and all of the rising that you've done on that tower that says that somebody else is the foundation of my stability, my survival, and my happiness, that's going to fall. So we don't invest in that. So we have to sort of like think about this page of coins is like starting from a whole new beginning. What do I value? Community. What is community? Something I have to follow. No. Something you have to participate with. Are you going to do it right every time? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're going to make a mess of it. Are you going to figure it out as you go along? Because you make a mess of it and then you learn and then you grow in community. That's social maturing. That means if you make a mess of it, there's no shame. You're maturing. You're learning. Not everybody knows how to do this organically. There is a process here at play. But we have to participate, right? So that's where your happiness is. Your happiness is in participating, and your happiness is in being in lots of different kinds of relationships. And it's hard work right now to pull us out of a stuck position that we've been conditioned towards in terms of what we value and what we don't value. Same goes with like a lot of other things. So what's the deal with romantic love? We have the return of the temple, the birth of a goddess, guidance, goddess energy, and treating that yearning and that desire for sanctuary as sacred. And the reason that we didn't get a love story with boy meets girl at the end of this as our happily ever after, which I was kind of hoping for, is because we have to build our foundation, because the one that we're standing on in the way of a happily ever after dominant myth is falling. That's not a happily ever after kind of a moment for that story. That story is at foot of the cross status right now in terms of, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so, you know, before we can't just leave it there but we have to leave because it's been a million years. We've been sitting here for a long time. You know, what we have to call in right now to manage this competition between old worldview that says love is subjugation and new worldview that says love is nurture and community. Like, love is like for everyone. To do that, this is a hard and rocky and bumpy moment in time. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have that love. This discernment is you're asked to step into discernment as this shift is taking place, because this tantric journey, and this is where we talk about intimacy with another and learning and growing in intimacy with another and conception, what is born of that. With the divine masculine and energy here at the bottom of the deck, I'm like, where's the divine feminine? Community rises, you know? And when community is fully empowered, then this discernment about who you're going to take this journey of intimacy and creating new life with, like where we work with these energies in different bodies, but also in the same body. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, when we look at the way that you know, this time and this place is not about adhering to an old story. It is about creating a new story, which means that when it comes to the competition for what you value, you have to use discernment. And that's a process. That's not a place. So we're still, you know, getting closer. And I think that what we're going to do is we're going to pick up this reading. We need a new vision. And we didn't get it, this reading. I think this reading was our reading of Hard Knocks. I think this was our reading of almost like marching orders. You know what I mean? Like, this is spirit coming in and without the kid gloves and saying, no more kid gloves. Let's look at this really honestly. We're gonna listen to spirit tell us about vision and dreaming, But right now, we're going to get really solid. We're going to work on our inner solidness around this notion of love is for you. That yearning for a sanctuary with intimacy with another for the reason of conception, for creating new life in this world. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. All unity, all tantric unity creates something new. It's a type of sensual experience that like brings you into a completion, that creates an experience of yourself that's new even. And so because this is such a sacred, you're creating new life, it's such a sacred thing that you embark on, a time for like repose and redistributing like your investment in others and in a good life versus a bad life based on like what's important. That's necessary in order to bring this divine masculine into our experience of like what that truly means with the Sun card. So I hope that this reading is more coherent than it feels, but I am going to bring us into, like, we're in the Akashic Records looking at right now, and what do we do about like not losing hope, you know, in one way or another. And, you know, this is huge. This is not just about romantic stuff, not losing hope in like quality of life. What do we do about not losing hope in quality of life? Well, this is where we are with our records. We are reorienting around concepts of love and sanctuary related to conception and sensuality and wholeness and oneness in like this magical experience with this divine masculine energy of agency. It needs to be worked on. And we're going to find out what that vision that we're building towards can be in the next reading. So this is actually going to be a series of 3 weeks. It's a series of 3 readings. So we will come back to that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave us here. Certainly feel free to put questions down below. Anything that like was too hard. Also, I hope there wasn't anything that came out too harsh. We are all working this out together. You're not alone. Wherever you are with this, I'm probably somewhere in that vicinity too. Like there's no, you know, I think it's really, really important, you know, when we work with one person's vision as like, you know, a tool for guidance, that we don't, you know, confuse that for hierarchy or, I'm better than you, or my position is, you know what I mean? Like we got to work with this. We have to work with allowing people to have their space and their voice without critique and comparison. So we have to understand like how we orient around what other people are creating. That's different than hierarchy, but it does entail a certain respect of boundaries and stuff like that. So like, I don't know why that's coming through other than to say, the reason that we're not there with community is community has not been invested in. Divine feminine aspect of God in the world has not been invested in. What we've had is a counterfeit consuming of energy. And now when we talk about what it is for that strength to be there, we don't even know. And so we are in that figuring it out. And I'm sad that the figuring out isn't conclusive, but we'll get there. We're going to do next week's reading on where we left off, and I hope that'll get us even closer. So I'm going to leave that there, and just hoping that you guys have the best week ever, and I'll talk to you again soon.